Hi, my name is Mike Rand with 3 Microsoft Visual Studio 2008 provides built-in templates to create powerful SharePoint workflows right out of the box. In this visual how-to, building an expense report approval workflow for SharePoint Server 2007 using Visual Studio 2008, we will be covering how to create a sequential workflow to manage an expense report approval process. We will also be making use of InfoPath 2007 expense report form in a modified version. To see more information on this modified version, please see the visual how-to creating a simple custom approval workflow for SharePoint Server 2007 using SharePoint Designer 2007. So let's get into it. The scenario we're going to cover is one where an expense report is submitted and needs to be approved. If the expense report is less than $5,000, then a manager is required to approve the expense report. If the expense report is equal to or more than $5,000, then we require a VP approval for the expense report. We've got Visual Studio 2008 open with our sequential workflow, and you can refer to the article to give you details on how to set everything up here, but I wanted to give you a quick example of dragging and dropping activities onto the document surface. So we're going to drag a complete task onto our VP workflow here. We'll go ahead and rename that to complete task VP. Go ahead and hit enter. Down here we have a correlation token that we need to set, so we'll go ahead and click the drop down. We'll select the VP task token. That brings up the expansion box here, so we'll click that. Our owner activity is automatically selected for us. So now we need to set up our task ID. So we'll click down here and we'll click this little ellipsis button over here. Now previously I created a task ID for the VP by binding it to a new member and creating that field. So now we're just going to bind to it an existing member. So just hit OK. Now the last thing we need to do here is generate an event handler for our complete task. So we'll right click and we'll select generate handlers. And in here we're going to paste in the following line of code. This will complete our task. Before we get to the workflow.xml, I wanted to show you the expense report approval workflow form. In this example, we're using a task form so that when the expense report is submitted inside the workflow, they can go to the task and launch this form and then approve it or reject it. So this will give you a context for what we're going to do next. Now we need to open up our workflow XML file. We need to add a section to our metadata collection to tie our custom task form to our workflow solution. So we'll add the following code. This is the URN for our custom task form that we created in InfoPath. Again, this is task 1, and that correlates to earlier when we created the task and set its task type to 1. This makes these two bound to each other. The next thing we need to add is we need to add an attribute to our workflow element. So we'll do that right now. This is the task list content type ID. And this is a fixed number. We'll go ahead and save this file and close it. Next, we need to open our feature XML file. So double click on that now. We need to tie in our custom task form. So we're going to go underneath the element manifest collection and we're going to add the following line of code. It's an element file. We specify the location to our custom expense approval form. All that's left to do now is run our project and test it. We can do this by hitting F5 and right from the Visual Studio IDE. This allows us to debug our workflows and set breakpoints. So I'll go ahead and click Run now. You'll notice that Visual Studio installs our assembly into the global assembly cache, copies our workflows and our custom expense forms out to our SharePoint server for us. So you can see this brings up our website here, Litware Inc., where we can now go through and test our workflow. Visual Studio provides a great platform to create and debug workflows. As you can see, building a simple sequential workflow to generate an expense report approval process in Visual Studio can be as easy as dragging and dropping. But by adding custom code to our workflow, we can generate very powerful and robust workflows. A benefit of creating workflows from Visual Studio is that you can package these solutions and deploy them as well. I will cover that topic in my next visual how-to, configuring and deploying a workflow to SharePoint Server 2007 using a solution package.